There are moments in life when arrogance meets grace, and the world stops to watch what happens next. This is one of those moments. In the heart of downtown Chicago, inside the lavish Aurelian Hotel, a story unfolded that would leave an entire city speechless and change one man forever. That morning, a young woman named Lena Carter stood outside the glass doors of the hotel restaurant, clutching a worn backpack to her chest. Her shoes were falling apart. Her hands were trembling from hunger and exhaustion. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Inside, chandeliers sparkled above marble floors. Every table gleamed with silver cutlery, and laughter floated through the air from people who had never known what it felt like to be invisible. Lena wasn't supposed to be there. But desperation can make courage bloom where it shouldn't. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The sudden silence made her pause. Waiters turned. Conversations slowed. A hostess gave her a look that said she didn't belong. "I'm sorry," the woman said coldly. "We're not taking walk-ins." Lena shook her head. "I'm not here for a table. I'm looking for work. Anything. Washing dishes, cleaning floors, serving tables, please." Before the hostess could answer, a voice from across the room spoke. It was calm, confident, and cold. "What's going on here?" Every head turned toward Edward Langford, the hotel's owner, a man whose name carried weight and whose money built empires. At 53, he was the kind of person who believed success was proof of superiority. Edward stood, straightening his suit jacket. His eyes swept over Lena with the detached curiosity one might reserve for a stray cat, wandering into a ballroom. "You're looking for work?" he asked, stepping closer. "Here in this place?" Lena swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I can do anything honest. I just need a chance." A faint smile touched his lips. It wasn't kind. "Everyone says that," he murmured. "But the world doesn't run on chances. It runs on merit." The room was listening now. Forks paused mid-air. Phones subtly tilted to record. Edward's tone sharpened. "Tell you what. You claim you can work. Let's see if you can earn your meal." Lena frowned. "Earn it?" He gestured to the far corner of the restaurant. "That piano hasn't been played properly in years. If you can play something worth hearing, you'll eat. If not, then maybe you'll finally understand that effort doesn't replace ability." The crowd shifted, sensing a show. Some smirked, others looked uneasy. Lena's gaze followed his hand to the grand piano gleaming under soft light. A Steinberg concert, grand, beautiful, and massive, its black surface reflecting everything around it. Her heart tightened. She hadn't touched a real piano in months. "I can try," she said softly. Edward chuckled. "No one's stopping you." As she walked toward the piano, whispers rippled through the room. "Who is she?" "She looks homeless." This should be interesting, but Lena didn't hear them. Her world had already narrowed to the piano in front of her, the instrument she once loved more than life itself. Because 2 years earlier, she wasn't homeless. She was a prodigy. Lena Carter had been the pride of Eastman Conservatory, a rising pianist whose performances made professors weep. Her parents, both musicians, had spent everything they had to nurture her gift. But one rainy night changed everything. A car crash. 2 lives lost, and one young girl left with nothing but grief and unpaid medical bills. The apartment was gone within months. The piano was sold next. Then came the shelters, the street corners, the long nights cleaning office floors to survive. Her fingers had once danced across ivory keys. Now they scrubbed tile with harsh detergent. But somewhere beneath the calluses, her music still lived, waiting to breathe again. And now in this gilded restaurant full of strangers, it was about to return. Edward Langford stood with his arms crossed, his smirk confident, his phone camera already recording. "Let's see what you've got," he said. Lena adjusted the bench. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. She could feel every gaze fixed on her. She looked at the piano, then at Edward. "You said to earn my meal," she whispered. "All right." Her fingers hovered over the keys. For a moment she hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'll play something honest," Edward scoffed. "Make it quick." But the moment Lena touched the keys, the room changed. The sound that emerged wasn't hesitant or broken. It was alive, deep, pure. The kind of music that pulls the air out of your lungs and replaces it with wonder. The first few notes drifted across the room like a prayer whispered into a storm. Conversation stopped. Knives froze mid-cut. Even the kitchen went silent, because the homeless girl wasn't fumbling through a tune. She was commanding the piano. She was home. The music poured from the piano like something ancient and sacred. It wasn't timid. It wasn't cautious. It was powerful, and it demanded to be heard. Every note carried years of pain, loss, and something stronger than both: hope. The melody began softly, a fragile whisper of memory, then grew, unfolding into something bold and breathtaking. The kind of sound that makes you forget where you are, that silences entire rooms without asking permission. At first, the diners were confused. Then their disbelief melted into awe. Forks stopped clinking against plates. Conversations faded into nothing. Even the waiter stood frozen, holding trays midair, afraid to move and break the spell. Edward Langford leaned back in his chair, the smirk fading from his face. He had expected awkward noise, maybe a few random notes to earn pity applause. But this was no performance by a desperate girl. This was mastery. Controlled, expressive, alive. "Good heavens," whispered a woman at a nearby table. "That's Chopin." An older man nodded slowly, eyes wide. Etude Opus 25, number 11. Winter Wind. I've heard concert pianists struggle with it. She's playing it flawlessly. Lena's hands flew across the keys with effortless precision. Her posture was perfect, her breathing calm. She didn't just play the notes. She sculpted emotion from them. Her fingers told stories the crowd didn't know they needed to hear. As the music rose, so did something inside her. She wasn't the girl sleeping on a cot in a shelter anymore. She wasn't the orphan who'd lost everything. She was a pianist again, an artist reclaiming her truth. Edward shifted uncomfortably, feeling eyes turned toward him. He had started this as a cruel test, a game to amuse himself and the wealthy few watching. But now the audience wasn't watching him anymore. They were transfixed by the girl he tried to humiliate. The tension in the room deepened. People leaned forward in their seats, breath held. A waiter at the back whispered to another, "She's not playing music. She's bleeding it out of her soul." Lena closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. Every note was a confession. Every chord a wound, healing itself in sound. Her fingers blurred, yet every strike was exact, each passage clean and deliberate. Then came the storm. Chopin's Winter Wind wasn't just a song. It was a trial by fire. And Lena was walking through it with grace. Her right hand raced through cascades of impossible notes while her left grounded the piece in rhythm, steady and fierce. Phones began to rise. Someone whispered, "Record this." People won't believe it. A live stream started. Within minutes, hundreds of viewers tuned in. Then thousands. Comments flooded in. "Who is she?" "She's unbelievable." "This is the best performance I've ever heard." Lena didn't know. She didn't care. She played for something purer than attention. She played for her parents. For every night she had stared at the ceiling of a cold shelter, wondering if her life still meant something. Her body swayed with the rhythm. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't playing for survival anymore. She was playing for freedom. The air in the restaurant grew heavy, charged with something beyond admiration. People were crying quietly. A businessman wiped his eyes. A woman covered her mouth. Even the waiters who had once looked down on Lena now stood in silent reverence. Edward couldn't bear it. He forced a laugh that came out weak and hollow. "All right, that's enough," he said loudly. "You've made your point." No one looked at him. A man with silver hair sitting near the piano turned slowly toward Edward and said in a low, steady voice, "Don't you dare interrupt her." The authority in that tone silenced even the billionaire. Edward sank back into his chair, his face pale. The performance surged toward its peak. Lena's hands were a blur, her body vibrating with the sheer force of the sound. It was a storm breaking over glass and marble. 1,000 notes colliding in perfect harmony, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm passed. The final notes fell like snow, soft, fragile, perfect. Silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then applause erupted like thunder. People leapt to their feet. Chairs scraped back. Hands clapped until palms stung. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Another cried openly. Lena sat still, hands trembling above the keys. Her chest rose and fell as she caught her breath. Edward Langford didn't move. His expression was unreadable, a mix of disbelief and humiliation. He had mocked her. He had used her. And in return, she had revealed something beautiful that no wealth could buy. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He had tears in his eyes and a soft voice that carried authority. "Miss," he said. That was extraordinary. "Where did you study?" Lena hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Eastman Conservatory." "Before my parents passed away." A collective gasp moved through the crowd. It all made sense now. The technique, the phrasing, the depth. This wasn't luck or coincidence. This was mastery earned through years of dedication and loss. Edward tried to speak, but the words stumbled out uselessly. "I didn't mean to—" The silver-haired man turned to him sharply. "Yes, you did. But what you meant doesn't matter anymore. You just reminded everyone here what real talent looks like." Phones were still filming. The livestream comments exploded in real time. "She's a prodigy. Find her name. Someone get her a concert." Lena stood up from the bench, still shaking. The crowd parted for her like she was royalty. Hands reached out to thank her, to congratulate her, to simply touch the person who had just made them believe in something again. The manager of the restaurant approached her quickly, his voice trembling. "Miss Carter, please accept our apologies. You can eat here anytime. On the house. Whatever you want." Lena smiled weakly. "Thank you. But I think I've already had what I came for." Her voice was gentle, but it carried across the room, because what she came for wasn't food. It was dignity, and she had just reclaimed it. As she walked toward the door, Edward Langford's phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications, messages, headlines already spreading. Billionaire mocks homeless pianist, gets publicly humbled. The story was just beginning to grow wings, and Lena Carter's life was about to change forever. Outside the grand restaurant doors, the cold evening air wrapped around Lena like a quiet embrace. Her pulse was still racing, the echoes of the music lingering in her body. She stepped onto the sidewalk, unaware that her name was already spreading faster than she could imagine. Inside, the crowd was still buzzing, half in disbelief, half in awe. At the center of it all, Edward Langford sat motionless, staring at his untouched meal. The man who had everything suddenly looked very small. His hands, which were used to holding contracts and wine glasses, now trembled as they gripped his phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Articles, clips, hashtags, outrage. Someone had live-streamed the entire performance. The video had already crossed 500,000 views. His name was trending, but not in praise. "Heartless billionaire humiliates homeless pianist." The headlines hit like blows. For the first time in his life, Edward Langford didn't have the words to defend himself. His reputation, built over decades, was unraveling minute by minute. And it wasn't because of what he'd said. It was because of what she had done. Lena Carter had played her truth in front of the world, and truth had a way of echoing louder than money ever could. Back outside, Lena found herself standing beneath a flickering streetlight. The applause was gone now, replaced by the hum of distant traffic and the faint sound of music still ringing in her ears. She didn't know what would come next. She just knew that for the first time in years she had played not for survival, but for herself. She turned to leave when a voice called out, "Miss Carter!" It was the man with silver hair from inside, the one who had defended her. He hurried across the sidewalk, his breath visible in the chill night air. "Please wait," he said, reaching her with a gentle smile. "My name is Dr. Henry Wallace. I'm a conductor at the Chicago Philharmonic." Lena blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. "You're with the Philharmonic?" "Yes," he replied. "And I've been listening to pianists for 40 years. What I heard tonight was not talent, it was genius." "Tell me, why aren't you performing professionally?" She looked down, clutching her backpack tighter. "After my parents died, I couldn't afford school. I had no one left, I just stopped." Dr. Wallace nodded slowly, his expression heavy with understanding. "The world doesn't always know how to treat its artists, but sometimes it gives them moments like this to remind them who they are." He handed her a business card, its edges crisp and white against her worn fingers. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. I can't promise the world, but I can promise you won't be invisible again." Lena's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll show up," he said simply. Behind them, the restaurant doors opened again. A woman in a sharp suit stepped out, phone in hand. "Miss Carter?" she called. "I'm with the Tribune. People are calling your performance the most moving thing they've ever seen. Would you be willing to talk?" Lena shook her head gently. "Maybe later. Not tonight," the reporter smiled. "Then you'd better get ready. The world's already talking about you." As they walked away, Edward watched from the restaurant window. He saw her standing under the streetlight, thin coat, tired eyes, that same quiet strength, and something unfamiliar twisted inside him. Shame. The next morning, Lena woke up in the shelter to a crowd of whispers. Her face was on phone screens. The headline read, "Unknown pianist stuns millionaire restaurant crowd." She rubbed her eyes, half convinced it was a dream. She spent the morning answering questions she never thought she'd hear again. Are you really from Eastman? Do you have recordings? Would you be willing to perform again? By noon, she was sitting in Dr. Wallace's office, a place filled with framed concert posters and dusty violins. He greeted her warmly, motioning to a seat near the piano. You look overwhelmed, he said kindly. I don't even know what to feel, Lena admitted. I just played to prove I deserved a meal. I didn't think anyone would care. Oh, they care, Dr. Wallace said with a smile. But this isn't about them. It's about you. The world just caught a glimpse of what I think you were born to do. He handed her a folder. Inside was a letter on official letterhead. This is an invitation, he said. The Philharmonic is performing in 3 months. I want you as our featured soloist. No auditions. I've already seen what I needed to see. Lena's heart thudded painfully in her chest. You're serious? As serious as the music you played, he said. You earned this. Tears blurred her vision. She nodded silently, unable to speak. By that afternoon, her story had reached international news. Messages poured in, offers from orchestras, scholarships, recording studios. The clip of her performance had crossed 5 million views. People around the world were calling her the girl who played her way out of hunger. Meanwhile, Edward Langford's empire trembled. His PR team scrambled to contain the storm, but every apology sounded hollow. The internet wasn't forgiving. He humiliated a starving musician became the headline no donation could erase. Reporters camped outside his office waiting for a statement. Investors called for meetings. Even the hotel chain's board began to distance themselves. The man who once looked down on everyone was now being judged by millions. For Lena, the change came quietly. She didn't seek fame or revenge. She accepted Dr. Wallace's offer, not to prove Edward wrong, but to prove herself right. That night, she went back to the piano at the shelter, a small, battered upright instrument with half its keys out of tune. She ran her fingers across the keys anyway, smiling softly. The music still came, even in broken notes, and for the first time it didn't hurt to play. Her future was beginning to sound like music again. 2 days later, the whole city was talking about her. Cafes, subway stations, offices, everywhere people turned, there was that same video playing on screens. The girl in the worn jacket, the billionaire's cruel smirk, the music that silenced an entire room. Lena Carter had become a symbol without even trying. Strangers shared her story like a spark that refused to die. Commentators called her the girl who humbled pride. Musicians called her a miracle in plain sight. She still lived at the shelter, still wore the same jacket, still carried the same backpack. But when she walked through the streets now, people stopped her. Some offered food, others hugs, others whispered thank you as if her music had done something holy. Inside the shelter cafeteria, the old television played a morning show. The host's voice carried over the room. In what's being called a modern Cinderella story, a homeless pianist named Lena Carter stunned the city with a performance that's moved millions to tears. Offers are pouring in from all over the world. Lena stared at the screen as her own face appeared, her eyes closed, her fingers gliding across the piano keys. She barely recognized the girl she saw. For a moment, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, Edward Langford's world was crumbling. He sat in his penthouse office surrounded by screens showing news anchors dissecting his fall. Langford's empire under fire, hotel stock plummets after viral scandal. Board members demanded statements. Investors pulled out. He tried to speak to reporters, but every word sounded like noise compared to the music that had already told the truth. He watched the video again. Lena's hands, the crowd, the silence. Every time the same feeling clawed at him. Shame and something else he couldn't name. Regret, maybe. He had built an empire out of control and image, and one song from a hungry girl had taken it apart like paper. Meanwhile, Dr. Wallace guided Lena through a whirlwind she hadn't prepared for. Interview requests came daily. Record labels called. Foundations offered scholarships. Take your time, he told her gently. Let the noise fade before you answer anyone. She nodded, overwhelmed but grounded. I just want to play, she said. That's all I ever wanted. A week later, she stood on the stage of a small recital hall for her first official rehearsal. The lights were dim, the piano pristine. She ran her fingers along the smooth ivory, feeling her pulse steady. This was where she belonged. Dr. Wallace watched from the front row as she began to play again, the same piece that had changed everything. But this time there was no tension, no fear, only freedom. Every note rang with clarity. Every pause carried peace. By the time she finished, the hall was silent again, but not because anyone doubted her. It was reverence. You're ready, Dr. Wallace said softly. More than ready. Within days, the Chicago Philharmonic officially announced their new soloist. The headline read, From Streets to Symphony, Lena Carter to debut with Philharmonic Orchestra. The announcement broke the internet again. Journalists wanted her story, music critics wanted her secrets, and audiences wanted tickets. But Lena refused interviews. She didn't want the world to hear her words. She wanted them to hear her music. Across town, Edward sat alone in his home office. The silence around him was unbearable. His phone buzzed constantly with messages he didn't want to read. For the first time in decades, he turned it off. He stared at his reflection in the window, wondering how he had become a man who laughed at hunger. He remembered the moment she looked him in the eyes before playing. The quiet power in her voice. I'll play, but when I do, you listen. He hadn't listened then. But now, every replay of her performance forced him to. One night, unable to sleep, Edward made a call to the restaurant's manager. Find her, he said, please. I need to see her. The manager hesitated. Mr. Langford, she's not exactly taking visitors right now. Edward sighed. Then give her this message. Tell her I'm sorry. The words felt strange leaving his mouth, like they belonged to someone better. The next morning, Lena arrived at the concert hall to find a letter waiting on the piano bench. The envelope bore no name, only the embossed logo of the Aurelian Hotel. She opened it slowly. Inside, in Edward's neat handwriting, were just 3 sentences. You reminded me that worth isn't bought. It's revealed. Thank you for reminding me how to listen. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her bag. No anger, no satisfaction, just quiet understanding. Because she didn't play to humiliate him. She played to remember herself. As her debut concert approached, the city buzzed with anticipation. Billboards showed her name. News anchors called her the Sound of Redemption. The Philharmonic's ticket line stretched around the block, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Lena walked through the quiet backstage halls before her first performance. Her nerves trembled, but her heart was steady. Behind the curtain, she could hear the murmur of thousands waiting. The applause started even before she appeared. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and whispered to herself, for them. For me, for the music. Then she stepped into the light. The lights dimmed as the crowd settled into silence. 1,000 faces stared toward the stage, waiting. The curtains rose slowly, and Lena Carter walked into the glow. She wore a simple black gown, nothing extravagant, but the way she carried herself made the stage feel sacred. Her hair was tied back, her hands steady. She sat before the grand piano, and for a heartbeat, everything in the world went still. She glanced at the front row. Dr. Wallace smiled with quiet pride. Beside him sat musicians, critics, and strangers who had been moved by her story. In one of the far seats, half hidden, sat Edward Langford. No cameras, no entourage, just a man alone trying to understand the kind of greatness that money could never purchase. Lena rested her fingers on the keys. The same piece that had changed her life waited for her again, Chopin's Winter Wind. But this time it wasn't a plea for survival. It was a declaration of who she had become. The first notes rang out soft and clear like glass catching sunlight. They filled the concert hall, delicate but unbreakable. The audience leaned forward as the melody built, note by note, like a heartbeat returning to life. The storm came again. But it was different now, controlled, purposeful. The chaos that once spoke of pain now roared with power. Each cascade of notes shimmered with grace, every chord a memory rewritten. She played for her parents, for the nights she'd gone hungry, for every moment someone had looked at her and only seen what she'd lost instead of what she carried inside. The orchestra joined her, a soft current beneath her tide of sound. Strings swelled like wind. Brass pulsed like thunder. The music grew until it felt too big for the hall, too big for any single room. In that moment, it wasn't just a concert. It was a resurrection. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers who had never met her. The critic who had come ready to measure her skill sat frozen, notebook forgotten on his lap. Even Edward felt something crack open in his chest. He had come to witness the girl he once mocked, but what he saw instead was a force of nature, a soul untamed by circumstance. Lena's fingers flew faster, climbing toward the final storm. Her body moved with the music like it had its own gravity. The entire hall breathed with her, waiting for the last note to fall. When it came, it wasn't loud. It was gentle, a single clear chord that lingered in the air before fading into silence. Then came the applause. It began with one clap, then another, until the entire hall erupted. People rose to their feet. The sound thundered through the rafters, wave after wave of gratitude and awe. Lena stood slowly and bowed, her heart pounding, her vision blurring with tears she hadn't expected. This time they weren't from pain. They were from peace. Backstage after the performance, chaos filled the corridor. Reporters, photographers, orchestral staff trying to reach her. But Lena slipped away quietly into a side room. The air was still there, filled with the faint echo of her own music. She sat down and let out a long breath. For a moment it was just her and the quiet. The same quiet she had once feared now felt like home. A knock came at the door. She turned, expecting Dr. Wallace. Instead, it was Edward. He looked smaller somehow, his posture uncertain, his eyes red-rimmed from more than just the concert. "I almost didn't come," he said. "I thought I didn't deserve to hear you play." Lena said nothing. She watched him struggle for words. "I can't undo what I did that day," he said finally. "But you should know. Your music changed something in me. I used to think dignity was earned through status. Now I know it's something you carry even when the world tries to strip it away." She studied him for a long moment. "I didn't play to change you," she said softly. "I played to remember myself." He nodded, eyes lowering. Maybe that's why it worked. There was nothing else to say. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, she spoke again. "Mr. Langford?" He stopped. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "Use yours well." He nodded once and left. Lena sat back down, the echoes of the crowd still faint in her ears. She smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet certainty. The world had heard her now, but more importantly, she had heard herself again. That night, articles filled every news feed. Lena Carter captivates the world with unforgettable debut. Homeless pianist turns tragedy into triumph. The music that healed a city. Her performance became a symbol of everything people had forgotten to believe in. Resilience, grace, and the idea that beauty can rise from anywhere. By morning, the video of her concert had already surpassed her first viral moment. The internet called her the sound of courage. Musicians posted tributes. Schools played her performance for students. Strangers donated to shelters in her name, and Lena Carter, the girl who once played for a meal, now played for the world. Weeks turned into months, and Lena Carter's name became a quiet legend whispered in every place where music lived. Her concert had not just gone viral. It had redefined how people saw art, struggle, and second chances. Everywhere she went, audiences treated her not as a celebrity, but as a living reminder that talent and humility could still exist together in the same breath. The newspapers moved on to other stories, as they always do, but the world hadn't forgotten her. Recordings of her debut were replayed endlessly. Her album, a simple collection of pieces she'd recorded late at night with Dr. Wallace, topped charts across streaming platforms. She didn't chase the spotlight. It found her wherever she went. She used the money from her recordings to start a foundation for young musicians who had talent but no means. Instruments were donated. Children from shelters and small towns began learning piano under teachers who believed in them as fiercely as her parents once had. And Lena herself spent hours every week teaching the basics to kids who reminded her of herself. Hungry, shy, but full of sound waiting to be heard. Her laughter returned. The light in her eyes no longer trembled under the weight of survival. She'd found purpose again, not in fame, but in giving others the courage to find their own rhythm. One afternoon, as she left the conservatory after a long rehearsal, she saw a familiar figure waiting near the steps. The winter sun hit the man's face, showing more lines, less certainty, and a quiet kind of weariness that money couldn't hide. Edward Langford. He walked toward her slowly, holding a small envelope in one hand. There were no cameras this time, no bodyguards. Just a man who had once been certain of everything and now approached with the humility of someone who had learned how fragile power really was. "Miss Carter," he said, voice low, "I wanted to thank you again. What you said that night about second chances, I took it seriously." Lena studied him for a moment. "What did you do with it?" He handed her the envelope. "I sold my controlling shares in the Aurelian. Started something new, a foundation. It provides scholarships for people who want to study music but can't afford to. I named it after my mother. She used to play piano when I was a boy." Lena opened the envelope. Inside was a single invitation card, embossed with elegant letters. "The Clara Langford Fund for Music Education." She smiled faintly. "You kept your word." He nodded. "You gave me something I didn't know I'd lost, a reason to listen again." For a long moment, neither spoke. Snow began to drift from the sky, soft and slow, melting against the pavement. Then Lena extended her hand. "Then I suppose we both found our music again." He shook her hand quietly, then left, his figure fading into the snowfall like a closing chapter that had finally made peace with itself. That evening, Lena returned to the empty concert hall where it had all begun. The stage lights were dim. The piano gleamed softly under their glow. She sat down, feeling the cool smoothness of the keys beneath her fingers. She didn't play Chopin this time. Instead, she played something of her own, a piece she'd been composing quietly for months, a song about loss and rediscovery, about falling and learning how to stand again. The melody was tender at first, then powerful, filled with rising chords that seemed to breathe. As the final notes faded, she looked out over the empty seats, imagining the faces of her parents somewhere among them, smiling the way they used to. The world outside was still loud, still chaotic, still full of people who measured worth by wealth. But Lena had proven that even in that noise, a single clear note of truth could still cut through everything. Somewhere, a street musician played under a bridge, inspired by her. Somewhere, a child pressed trembling fingers to a piano key for the first time. Somewhere, someone who thought their story was over found a reason to begin again. And in the quiet heart of the city, Lena Carter kept playing, no longer for survival, no longer for approval, but for the simple, eternal beauty of sound itself. Her story had begun with humiliation and hunger. It ended with harmony, and the echo of that harmony stretched far beyond her music, reminding anyone who listened that no voice, no gift, no person was ever truly lost, only waiting to be heard.